Hi there, I'm Frances and I work at the Migration Museum, and today I'm going to be talking to you about a Lewisham institution, and that's Maggie's Cafe, and in particular I'll be talking to you about Maggie's Cafe co-founder and namesake Maggie Kondoka. Maggie's Cafe opened in 1983 in the heart of Lewisham, just by the train station. It was opened by Maggie and her husband Mazid. It's been serving up food and a warm welcome ever since. It's still in operation. Maggie's sons now run the cafe, as Maggie sadly passed away in 2020. So this talk, it's a tribute to Maggie, a woman in business. And also, as Maggie was Irish, my talk shines a light on Irish migration to Britain. I've had a few people ask me when I do this talk why focus on the Irish. So when it comes to the Irish in Britain, there are similarities between the two countries. On the whole, Irish people are mainly white, speak English, they hold certain sort of visa and voting rights other migrant groups don't have in this country. And while some of that is true, the Irish have definitely faced challenges in their host nation here, be that dealing with the open hostility during the IRA bombing campaigns in Britain, from the days of no blacks, no dogs, no Irish signs in boarding houses to the era of so-called Irish jokes. They've definitely faced challenges during their time here. Also, the Irish have been coming to Britain for centuries and in really large numbers. In fact, no country in Europe has been as affected by emigration over the past 2 centuries as Ireland, with approximately 10 million emigrating from the island of Ireland since 1800. And I believe the Irish have played a significant part in Britain's migration story and contributed much to British society, just like Maggie here. And also it's a topic close to my heart, as both of my parents emigrated from Ireland to Britain. So Maggie was born Maggie Fitzpatrick in County Cavan in the Republic of Ireland in 1945. She was the youngest of 7 children, youngest of a really big family. But just how does a lady from rural Ireland end up this Lewisham institution? Well, Irish migration to Britain has taken place for thousands of years. Due to the two countries' proximity and links, the movement has ebbed and flowed due to different economic, political and social factors. The first flow of mass immigration occurred in the aftermath of the Great Famine in Ireland. This was in the 1840s and 1850s, and it was one of the worst famines of modern times in relation to population. About 1 million people in Ireland are estimated to have died, and some 2 million emigrated. The population of Ireland has still never really recovered. So that was around the 1850s. Then fast forward about 100 years, when Ireland was going through a really tough time after the Second World War. It had gained independence from Britain, from the UK, and it was an emerging independent state. Unemployment was really high, and about 500,000 Irish people emigrated from Ireland to Britain in the 1950s. Considering the country's population was under 3 million, this was naturally a really huge loss. So this was pretty much Maggie's generation, post-Second World War. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Irish Sea, Britain needed rebuilding after World War II and actively encouraged the Irish to come over to fill roles in construction, manufacturing, and the newly formed NHS. They often did this by placing job adverts in Irish newspapers and holding recruitment fairs in Ireland. A notable trend of Irish migration is the fact that more women have emigrated than men, with the women young and single and not travelling as part of a family. Maggie typified this trend when she first came over. Obviously, every migrant story is unique, but some reasons that have been cited for this female trend have been, in rural areas, the exclusion of women from inheriting land that often left them homeless and without any form of income. Plus, there was a custom of paying dowries in certain rural areas up until at least the Second World War. That has died out now, but was certainly a custom for many people, including my own granny. And also there was a marriage bar in Ireland. Single women had to give up certain professions once they married. Another factor pointed to is the strong influence the Catholic Church had on the emerging Irish state. A lot of clergy were actually involved in lawmaking and policy making. This kind of led to socially sort of conservative attitudes prevailing. And I think this led to a lot of women just sort of wanting to leave and escape more anonymous, more liberal cities in Britain. I think this is an indicator of just how brave and strong these women were. They weren't just at the mercy of politics and policy making. They decided to, in order to make better lives for themselves, they simply had to leave. So Maggie came to England in 1966 and met her future husband Mazid in London. Mazid himself had migrated from Bangladesh in 1962. And what I love about Maggie's story is how it's also such a London love story. Due to their home country's links, colonial links with Britain, they both end up meeting here in London, the one-time centre of the British Empire. Maggie and Mazid married in 1972 and went on to have 3 children, making Maggie a busy working mother also. Her son, Oliver, when we interviewed him, said he believed that it was Maggie and Mazid's shared experiences as migrants that really brought them together. And when I read about them, they just seemed like real soulmates. Again, I think this is another sign of Maggie's strength of character. She followed her heart and didn't care about the prejudices of others, despite the fact that they were in a mixed race relationship. So Maggie and Mazid, they both had backgrounds in hospitality. I think they met when they were both working in a restaurant in Leicester Square. And in time, they decided to start their own business, Maggie's Cafe. Mazid put his culinary skills to good use in the kitchen, and Maggie was front of house. As highlighted in this exhibition, the attributes many migrants possess, such as courage, resilience, sacrifice, make them great candidates for running their own businesses, and Maggie and Mazid were no different. They worked 6 days a week, starting at 5:30 a.m. and finishing at 9 p.m, all the while raising a young family. For a long time, the family lived above the premises. And once the children were a certain age where they could help out in the restaurant, sometimes if it was getting busy downstairs, Maggie or Mazid would get a broom and bang on this ceiling. And that was the children's sign that they had to come down and help out in the cafe. Very much a family affair. Branding on Maggie's menu features the phrase cave meal of fortune, which is Gaelic for 100,000 welcomes. Maggie was famous for her endless cups of tea and large food portions. Her son, Oliver, believes it was his mum's tough upbringing, which led to her compulsion, his words, not mine, compulsion to make sure everybody was well fed and watered. Oliver also reckoned that his mum gave herself tennis elbow from pouring so many cups of tea, because there was this policy of an endless cup of tea at Maggie. And that's why we've pictured Maggie with a teapot here as well. It's very much her signature. And even when Maggie died, some of the floral tributes, one of them included a huge teapot, floral teapot in her honour. So as well as tea, Maggie's menu also features traditional Irish dishes. It still does. Cooked breakfasts featuring Irish bacon, Irish black pudding. There's also Irish stew on the menu, boiled bacon and cabbage. These are really popular one-pot Irish dishes. I think Maggie understood the emotional power of food, especially for homesick migrants. Food can transport us sort of in an instant and offer a physical, tangible taste of home. Mazid put his touches to the menu too, with a fresh curry cooked every day. And also, he used to add his own blend of spices to an Irish stew. Maggie's Cafe became, and still is, an important part of the community here in Lewisham for 40 years now. It's a real community hub, offers a warm welcome, jobs, and it also contributes a lot to local causes and charities. The cafe's weathered many recessions, changing tastes, fashions, Lewisham's regeneration, and of course the pandemic, but it's still here going strong. As mentioned, Maggie sadly passed away in 2020. There was a huge outpouring of grief at her passing, with crowds lining the streets to pay respect to the funeral cortege. The cafe's social media pages were inundated with condolence messages, and news of Maggie's death made it onto the front pages of local newspapers and also the National Irish Post. So she really made her mark here in Lewisham. I've done this talk to many people over the months, and people just speak really fondly and warmly whenever you mention Maggie's name. Her presence is still very much felt. As Maggie's generation of Irish migrants age and they pass away, they're sometimes referred to as the forgotten Irish. That is, kind of forgotten by the relatives they left behind in Ireland. Their offspring are seen to assimilate really quickly into British society. But as long as Maggie's is still standing, Maggie Kondoka and the contribution she made to the area will always be remembered.